Saturday, November 20th, 2021, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So, JP Morgan, they've been caught again manipulating the price of silver, and they've been fined millions again. We're going to look into that. Before we go further into the JP Morgan story, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's happened in the past week. And I'm going to recommend a couple of books that many of you know already, but of course, we get always new viewers, new people interested in the message of this channel. So if you want to understand what's going on in the world today, I think it will help greatly. And I'm sure there are other books as well that will help greatly. But the ones that I really refer back to a lot are these: Fiat Money Inflation in France by Andrew Dixon White, How It Came, What It Brought, and How It Ended. It's not just about money, it's about what happened to France in the late 1780s to the mid 1790s. And all the symptoms, all the things that happened there are happening now in Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, in the Western world, so to speak, and maybe even all around the world, because the world has followed the Western model for the last 25, 30 years. Even China, supposed to be a communist country, they're having their troubles as well, with a lot of debt, with a real estate collapse. But by reading this book, you will see how debt, wealth inequality, inflation, and tyranny all go hand in hand, and how eventually all those three or other factors conspire to really destroy the previous order of society. And I think that is happening right now. We're going to talk about it when I finish referencing the books. The other one is When Money Dies by Adam Ferguson. And it's very similar to this, but it's a different part of the world. It's in Germany, and the old Austro-Hungarian Empire after World War I, what happened there economically, politically, financially, monetarily. It was very similar to what happened in France. And again, it led to the collapse of the previous existing order of things. And in that case, it was the German Empire and the Emperor, the Kaiser Wilhelm. In France, of course, it was the monarchy, Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette. The French monarchy collapsed, and we got Napoleon as a result. In Germany and Europe, we got an Austrian leader about 10 years later, after the collapse of 1923. And with that, let's go into what happened this week. And one of the words they used a lot that became common, a word that's not supposed to be common, was the word catastrophe. In German, it's Katastrophen. And unfortunately, when things are unraveling, catastrophes come like in spades. And it seems like we're getting catastrophes now. We're getting a catastrophe, unfortunately, in Austria, where it looks like they're going back into a tyrannical government, in my opinion. Some of you might disagree with me. They're instituting lockdown from Monday for a maximum of 20 days. Of course, they could change that. Yeah, that's not set in stone. So it could go on for months, just like in Australia. I think they promised a few weeks and then it became 3 months. Well, but the worst thing, in my opinion, the most catastrophic event this week was the Austrian government deciding that they're going to make it obligatory for people to have a medical procedure. Yes, Chancellor Schallenberg, that's the Prime Minister of Austria, they call him Chancellor. I think he's relatively new in this post. Previous Chancellor resigned less than a month ago, I think. And I looked this guy up, and it's not surprising that he's from a very old aristocratic family. The people who in the past in Europe thought they knew best, that they had to rule the peasants. And here we have the Chancellor of Austria, who's from a family that has a, I think, 500-year history. So it seems to be something that's coming back, that we are supposed to do as we're told by our masters. So like feudalism is coming back. If you look at Ursula von der Leyen, her family as well has the same kind of background. It makes you wonder, right? Anyway, I thought that was very significant. And now in other countries like the Netherlands, they're coming back with lockdowns, and people are concerned. They see what's happening in Austria. And this is not just happening in Austria, and it's not going to happen somewhere else. So people are concerned. And we saw last night and in the early hours of today, Saturday, that there has been riots and violence in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. Rotterdam is, I think, the biggest port in Europe, second biggest city in the Netherlands. So, and the police apparently shot at the protesters. And it makes you wonder whether it is justifiable for people to defend themselves with violence when the state is threatening them with obligatory medical procedures. So I will not be surprised if we get more and more of what's happening in the Netherlands. I've read that there's going to be huge protests today in Vienna. I think there are protests in London as well. And talking about self-defense, of course, in the US, we had the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, not guilty on all counts. And that as well, I'm not going to make a judgment here. I'm just observing what's happening. But that seems to have divided the United States as well. It's always about divide and conquer, right? Maybe this is all by design. They want us to rise up. They want us divided, because that's the only way they can come in and provide a solution. Or I could be wrong. It could be unraveling for the powers that be. But I don't know. I'm just trying to observe things. So yeah, in the US, I've seen that there's been riots like in Portland, Oregon. So it seems to be a division as well, left versus right, or conservative versus woke, whatever you want to call it. In Europe, we could still see a division between the purebloods, right, the unvaxxed and the vaxxed. There is a lot of, division. But there's also a lot of hope that people are waking up to all the shenanigans that we've been told for the last almost 2 years now. So in terms of what's going on, I still think all the symptoms are there. The tyranny, the debt, the insurmountable debt that the economies have, the wealth inequality, political upheaval, social upheaval. It's all happening in spades, and there will be many more books, I think, written about 2020 to 2023, 2024. We don't know how long this is going to last, many more books written about the period that we're going through. It will be one for the ages. This just happened like in Germany and Central Europe. This just happened in France. But what's happening today is happening all around the world. And that's why I haven't changed my mind about currency collapse. Yes, it looks like they want to institute more lockdowns. Is it going to stop the inflation? No, it's going to make it even worse. Because once we come out of lockdown, again, if we go into lockdown, it's going to disrupt things even more. They're going to pump even more currency and debt into the system. Debt, I mean government spending. And yes, we saw yesterday one of the Fed, top officials of the Fed saying that they're going to accelerate tapering. But they're still injecting credit into the system. Accelerating tapering is just decreasing the amount of QE they do. And they could change it very quickly. They're very flexible, especially when they have to do more. If the central bankers and politicians were really adamant about fighting inflation, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They would be raising interest rates, the central bankers. Governments would be cutting down spending, cutting the size of government. But that's never going to happen. And that's why I think it's more important than ever to have physical gold and silver. And I know that JP Morgan and their fellow bullion bankers will manipulate the price of gold and silver for as long as they can, but eventually things will unravel, just like they did in the late 60s, early 70s with the London gold pool. That was another kind of manipulation. That one was overt, not covert. JP Morgan, of course, they've paid this fine, but they admit to nothing. They don't admit to wrongdoing and price manipulation. But why are they paying the fine, right? So, yes, I know things are getting much more important than just keeping a hold of your savings that you've been able to accumulate over your lifetime. Of course, it depends on your age. You might just be starting out, but it's never too early to start trying to accumulate real savings, gold and silver. And I'm not talking about investments. Investments are a different thing. And I'm not here to tell you where to put your money, even though I'm invested somewhat, not a huge percentage of my savings, and I've done it into the miners, especially silver and gold miners, some energy companies, but mostly the monetary metals, because I think even if eventually we get a total collapse and yes, the economies are on their knees, there will only be one money or two kinds of money left. That will be gold and silver. And there will be in huge demand. And the companies that produce that money are the miners. So let's look at the JP Morgan story then. One of my viewers sent it to me overnight. I woke up and I had the email. Anyway, let's go through this article quickly here, and then I'm gonna show you how much JP Morgan has paid in fines, not just in the precious metals market, but in everything for the last almost 20 years. So JP Morgan Chase and Co. agreed to pay $60 million to settle class action litigation by investors who accused the largest U.S. bank of intentionally manipulating prices of precious metals, futures, and options. The other thing I would say, they've been caught doing this many times. If you or I were caught doing something like that one time, we'd probably be banned from trading in that market. Just like the Hunt brothers, they were banned from trading futures, especially silver, after 1980, and I think that was a wrong decision. But JP Morgan, no, they keep playing the game. Well, it's because JP Morgan is in charge of everything. JP Morgan is the government. Anyway, let's keep going. The settlement disclosed on Friday stemmed from sprawling U.S. government investigations into a form of illegal trading in precious metals and U.S. Treasury markets, known as spoofing. Well, U.S. Treasury markets and precious metals, the most important markets really for the health of the fiat dollar. And that's why they don't go to prison. That's why they're not stopped from trading in these markets, because they're doing this on behalf of the government. They are the government. Yes, the government will investigate it. It's just theater. JP Morgan did not admit wrongdoing in agreeing to the settlement. So if they didn't do anything wrong, why are they paying the fine, right? Which covers traders in precious metals, futures and options from March 2008 to August 2016 and requires approval by a federal judge in Manhattan. Lawyers for the investors called the accord substantively fair, citing, among other reasons, the risks of continued litigation. The payout would recover about 70% of the estimated $915 million of class-wide damages, the lawyers added. JP Morgan declined to comment. Spoofing is where traders place orders they intend to cancel, hoping to move prices to benefit their market positions. And they also, I would say, spoof the market to stop precious metals moving through key levels. Think of the resistances, technical resistances, especially in silver lately around 25. I'm sure there's spoofing going on right now. I can't prove it. And I'm sure JP Morgan's still at it. They'll pay some more millions in fines. The New York Fed will just credit their accounts with reserves to pay for that fine. That's how it works. In September 2020, JP Morgan entered a deferred prosecution agreement to pay $920 million, including $436 million criminal fine to settle government probes into spoofing in precious metals and treasuries. The New York-based bank in September reached a $15.7 million settlement with investors over treasury spoofing. Lawyers of the precious metals investors plan to seek up to 1/3 of their settlements, or $20 million, to cover legal fees. So yeah, there is one rule for us, one rule for them. And that's the other thing about the social upheaval, the wealth inequality. It's also the inequality of judicial procedure. The bankers, they get away with criminal activity and they just keep going and going. And the fines they pay are just the cost of doing business. If we did a fraction of what JP Morgan has been doing for the last 20 years, we'd be with Bernie Madoff at Rikers Island. I don't know if that's where he is, and I'm not even sure if he's still alive, but we'd be there for life. So Catherine Austin Fitts, of course, has done great work on this subject, and I've got here, it's I think over 20 pages of all the fines JP Morgan Chase selected legal, regulatory, and enforcement settlements 2002 to 2019. So there are dozens and dozens of fines here, and I've added all the fines that they paid up until 2019, that is, and it was up to $43.77 billion. That was from 2002 to 2019. So I'm sure that's getting up to 50 billion probably. So yes, I'm not saying things are smooth. They're not by any stretch of the imagination. But the hope is that we can choose a good path once this whole system implodes. And I think it will. And not go down the way that the French and the Germans did 200 and 100 years ago, because I think we can do better than they did. And hopefully the powers that be, the bankers, people like JP Morgan and the central banks will get their comeuppance. But the only way to do that is to try to inform people about what's going on, about who really holds the reins of power, and why it's a bad idea to keep a lot of your savings with these people, especially with a criminal institution like JP Morgan Chase. And I can say it's criminal because you just read that they paid a criminal fine. Only criminals pay a criminal fine, right? So with that, yes, I'm going to bid you farewell. Wish you a nice rest of the weekend. And yes, we will be doing our live stream tomorrow night. Billy will be there. And yeah, I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.